Well, this is what it's come to. In the process of responding to a tweet suggesting that a white person's skin color will never be a factor in what's causing their difficulties, I decided to search the term white people in Google's latest news just to provide examples. And this is what I saw. Article after article blaring the fanfare, white people are to blame, this time for our collective carbon footprint, because apparently white people can't even eat correctly. As much as I wish I could discredit the idea of research being bought and paid for by companies and political wings attempting to push an agenda, the recent efforts of Joe Bozeman absolutely reek of it.
Our food preferences have a direct impact on the environment. However, previous research has largely ignored the role that demographics play. My colleagues and I have addressed this problem by performing a study on climate change adaptation as it relates to food consumption. What was interesting was that we found different racial groups affect the environment differently. While whites affect the environment the greatest in things like greenhouse gas and water, blacks affect the environment the most in land. Our take-home message is this: scientists and policymakers should consider socio-demographic factors from the onset, because one size does not fit all.
First and foremost, it should be noted that Bozeman is a PhD candidate, a student still grasping for higher rungs of authority in his field. And while that point alone doesn't discredit the quality of his research, it does speak to his current need to establish a distinguished reputation and bolster his notoriety for the sake of his future career. As a matter of fact, up until now, he has made solid strides to that end. Although, for reasons about which I will make no assumptions, certain directions of those strides seem to have reached dry spells at one point or another. Along with several educational posters and a regular presence at a number of national symposiums on the topic of environmental sustainability, he's made an admirable effort to establish a voice in education. First with a 3-month position as a tutor on physics, statistics, and dynamics at Central State University, then a handful of courses at Wright State University, and finally 4 one-segment courses for the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. How he was invited to host these courses at the behest of the government without the mark of a PhD notwithstanding. And as far as I can tell, none of his work involved any form of identity politics. However, his activities began to slow and eventually ceased for several years. His last credit as an educator was from April of 2016. He spoke at the Low Carbon Earth Summit in China in September of 2014 before dropping off the map for 3 years, and his presence in academic publications dropped off even earlier, with his last credit being an interagency paper for the VA Center for Engineering and Occupational Safety and Health in 2012. Throughout his educational career up to that point, he had amassed an impressive 18 awards to his name, none of which had to do with his race. But from the time of his re-emergence at Barn Race 2017, he has since won 4 more, 3 of which are the 2017-2018 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Scholarship, the 2018 Carl Storm Underrepresented Minority Fellowship, and the 2018-2019 Bayer Monsanto Diversity STEM Fellowship. And now, after 7 years of silence in any journal, all of a sudden he's filtering concepts of environmental sustainability through race politics in a paper which has doubled his impact factor over this past week alone, owing to the left-wing media jumping on it like a fat kid on a cupcake and spamming it en masse. Currently, his member page at the International Society for Industrial Ecology website, of which he has been a member since September of 2017, features a notably cringeworthy nod to, quote, underrepresented populations worldwide, and a collaborative invitation to diverse engineering and social science disciplines in particular. For the record, I don't question this man's education, his drive, or his passion for his field of study, but I am justifiably suspicious of his motives given the circumstances surrounding his activity of the past 2 years. And to top it off, not only was it Monsanto that granted him his most recent award, but they also funded this research. You know, Monsanto, the corporation known for massive chemical spills, pesticide poisoning, controversial GMO foods, and the production of Agent Orange. And they not only have the audacity to lecture people about environmental sustainability, they aim to do it while jumping on the blame white people bandwagon. As if the chemicals spewing from their factories and into the fucking food supply contribute none of the impact, let alone most of it. Having gone through this paper, I can tell you that it's loaded with math and terminology that the average layperson is not going to understand. Certainly not the mouth-breathing journalists who were so eager to tout it as yet more quote-unquote evidence to the wrongdoings of white people. In all fairness, I don't understand most of the methodology here either, but that doesn't faze me because I don't have to understand the mechanics of lunar orbital expansion when the paper referring to it is arguing from the pretense that the moon is made of cheese. And that's precisely what is happening here. In the first section of the introduction, Bozeman alludes to the importance of, quote, environmental justice and culturally sensitive environmental education practices, which is in reference to a 2003 paper from the Canadian Journal of Environmental Education entitled Under Participation and Ethnocentrism in Environmental Education Research, Developing Culturally Sensitive Research Approaches, which you can already tell is absolute horseshit from the title alone. This paper posits that the evident lesser interest from black people concerning the environment should be viewed from a black racial lens on the grounds that related modes of participation, such as nature hikes and bird watching, are viewed as, and I quote, a white thing. In other words, the racist fear that white people will raise their eyebrows at a black person doing these things, or more likely, the admonishment from other black people for undertaking white activities, which, of course, they fail to mention. As if either of these ridiculous quote-unquote cultural fears constitutes a valid excuse. It smacks of the same decolonized science nonsense we heard from UCT, pushing the notion that we should, quote, do away with science and start over because it was developed through a white perspective. As if the processes of deductive reasoning and the scientific method give two shits about your perspective, be it from the color of your skin or the delusions in your NPC brain. Reality does not care about your feelings, your culture, or you in general. You are not special and you don't deserve special consideration. Bozeman, despite his education, has adopted this attitude. He's literally saying that we should consider different forms of education for different races of people because
one size does not fit all.
Because somehow, in his head, the indivisible reality of what needs to be done in order to ensure environmental sustainability isn't palatable, appropriate, or even applicable to all races of people. Apparently, the different races live on different planets with different problems, all in utopian societies wherein their diets are somehow mandated based on the color of their skin. From what I understand, his sample was taken from the Environmental Protection Agency's Biennial Food Consumption Intake Database, which cross-references the survey of 10,000 individuals across 7,000 foods broken down to their agricultural components. And while I find the suggestion that this sample is accurately representative of the entirety of the observed demographics to be dubious at best, I honestly don't care to look into it any further. Because even if the numbers are perfectly accurate, he still intends to use those averages to educate the different racial groups separately and differently as if race is a cultural monolith. And it isn't. This can most easily be observed in the white people you seek to condemn, which is why your condemnation of white people is especially absurd. Do you really believe that the kale-eating, kombucha-drinking hipsters of Seattle, Washington have the same dietary habits as the barbecue lovers of Kansas City, Missouri? And even that example to demonstrate your lunacy is still far too simple to be an accurate portrayal of reality. I just got back from Seattle myself, and I had one of the best steaks I've ever had in my life there, after some awesome biscuits and gravy that I had just a few blocks away that morning. The best you could hope to do would be to observe regional eating habits irrespective of race and spread education where it's needed, even though it would behoove everyone everywhere to know more about the environmental consequences of their dietary habits. But even then, you're still not addressing the root of the problem. It's not the consumer ripping up land hundreds of acres at a time to ramp up crop production. It's not the consumer filling massive cattle ranches to capacity and then slaughtering them in a factory line. It's not the consumer processing these foods by the metric ton and pumping them full of artificial flavoring agents and industrial-grade preservatives. It's not the consumer throwing out unsold, perfectly good food products without a single thought of donating them where they're needed. These are problems with food production, Bozeman, not food consumption. Supply is a direct response to a demand, I'll grant you that. But initially, the demand was simply for food. Sustenance. The American people didn't know what a fucking hamburger was until German immigrants started slapping them between buns as a quick lunch meal for the working class, and they didn't become the root of an obesity epidemic until Ray Kroc decided to enter the real estate market. When other companies started following his business strategy and pumping their food full of MSG, suddenly there were fast food addicts as far as the eye could see. We live in a world that mega corporations built, Bozeman. Corporations like your masters at Monsanto. The land of capitalizing on people's laziness and hunger for instant gratification. The land of the drive-through window and the TV dinner. The land of shrinking showtimes and ever-expanding ad space filled to the fucking brim with fake food props dressed up to make their garbage product look like the most tempting thing in the world. I can't remember the last time I saw an advertisement for anything even resembling a home-cooked meal, or unprocessed fruits and vegetables apart from the reaction to the GMO scare. You know, when we had to start putting non-GMO on products that Monsanto hadn't touched? When was the last time you saw a commercial for a refrigerator or a stove advertising its core function and not the fact that we built smartphones and tablets into it? Hell, I can't remember the last time I saw a commercial for cookware of any kind that wasn't an as seen on TV cash grab. Maybe on the Food Network, and only then when it's one of their stars' signature lines. We're not even seeing ads for microwaves, Bozeman, because every fucking home has one and they're running overtime while the kitchen stove becomes little more than glorified counter space. Consumers did not make this environment, Bozeman, let alone the white people you're trying to frame. Your masters over at Monsanto, along with the handful of other corporations that process everything they grow, made this environment. And now you think you can blind us to that fact by blaming the one fat kid in the room that all the other fat kids hate for your shrinking pile of cookies, even as you sit on a giant fucking billboard that reads, "Cookies are delicious"? Go fuck yourself. You make me sad, Bozeman. You really do. It's easy to tell that early on, you actually cared. You had passion. It wasn't about getting ahead, it was about making a difference. You were one of the real examples that these social justice clowns should have followed if they really wanted to see faces like yours in STEM. But clearly something changed as soon as they started patting you on the back for the color of your skin. Because you just took dirty money from the source of some of the most heinous crimes against the environment just to earn yourself some notoriety at the expense of the white people you threw under the bus. You're a smart man, Bozeman. You've seen the state of college campuses. You've seen what the media looks like these days. You knew how this paper would be received, and you rode that wave of hatred just to get ahead. Don't insult our intelligence and tell us that Monsanto didn't promise you fame and fortune, because we both know that if you were really investigating the problem of our overconsumption, the finger of blame would point right back at them, and they certainly wouldn't have paid you for it. You were just too shameless and cowardly to bite the hand that fed you. Let this paint a picture for those of you who don't understand just how bad this social justice nonsense has gotten. This bullshit spilled from the corrupting influence of social justice educational institutions with deep pockets through the Canadian Journal of Environmental Education and into the Journal of Industrial Ecology, courtesy of a hopeful PhD candidate bought and paid for by the largest and most powerful seed company in the world, and then blasted from countless media outlets to misinform millions. If you can see this happen and you still think that this social justice crap doesn't pose a threat, you need to have your head examined.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what you saw here, have a look at my other videos and leave me your thoughts in the comments. If you support my message, then please like, favorite, and subscribe. If you'd like to help this channel improve, you can reach out to me on Twitter or on Facebook with any suggestions. And if you'd like to support me more directly, please consider following me on Patreon. Links in the description. Thanks again, and I'll catch you all in my next video.